This is because the preliminary view of reported sexual harassment, SEER, and sexual offenses paint a worrisome picture. There are also seemingly high numbers of incidents and cases that are unreported, given the nature of the military command and control structure. It was against this background that I established the Ministerial Task Team, consisting of the following members: Chairperson, Ms. Toko Mpumlwana, who you all know, a former chairperson of the Gender Commission of the Republic of South Africa. And next to the Deputy Minister here, Ms. Britta Rothman, who is quite familiar with issues of sexual abuse, who is a legally trained person. And beyond Rita, you have Dr. Guma. And then next to the chairperson here, we have General Nodola, retired. We've decided to bring in the general because, as you know, the military structures can be very complicated at times. And one of the things we want her to do is to unlock that door to facilitate that when there is a need to interact with members at unit levels, in the different services, wherever they are, she will be the one to give us guidance as to how we do that. She's part of the team, but in the main, people may not understand how these structures work. She will be there to assist them to unlock the door. We then have a secretariat consisting of members from the Department of Defense, both from the civilian and from uniform. They will constitute a secretariat. We will have a team of psychologists, of social workers, and chaplains who will be working very closely with this team. There too, the idea is to help unlock the door, or assist the victims to open up to the team without feeling intimidated by this process. The mandate we've given to the task team is as follows: to conduct a study in the following areas. Firstly, the reporting, investigation, and conclusion of sexual harassment cases over the period. I've started it from 2014 to date. It does not mean that if there are cases which are pending prior to 2014, those cases will not be investigated. The reporting, investigation, and finalization of sexual exploitation and abuse cases over the same period. Where reference is made to the SANDF members, such should include regular as well as reserve force members. In other words, as you know, we have the regular force, we have the reserve force members, we have cases which have been reported of sexual favors which people have to offer in order for them to go on a call-up from the side of the reserve force members. So this process extends to the reserve force member, and I wish to call on them to step forward and report such incidents. Under sexual harassment cases, the task team should firstly analyze the legislative framework, amongst others, for the reporting, investigation, and finalization of sexual harassment cases within the SANDF as a whole. Secondly, focus should thus be on the management of sexual harassment in the workplace, both internally and externally, where our uniformed and civilian members execute their mandates. Thirdly, the task team should formulate its findings and recommendations in relation to the management of sexual harassment within the SANDF environment by also looking comparatively at the management of such incidents in other government departments, but in particular other armed forces in the world, with similar constitutional dispensation, or where females are as representative as in the South African National Defence Force, cognizant that we have one of the highest numbers of women serving in the armed forces. Now, due to the systems in place for reporting and investigating and accounting for SIA cases in mission areas under the auspices of the United Nations, these matters are well documented and will form the starting point of analysis for the task team. In particular, the task team must focus on analyzing the legal and procedural frameworks in place with an aim of identifying shortcomings and highlighting successes for which the SANDF have been cited by the UN. I'm sure you are familiar with this. There have been cases which have been reported by the UN where our people are involved in cases of sexual exploitation and abuse. We need to analyze the outcome of matters reported and investigated in an effort to determine the reasons for guilty or not guilty findings in order to inform recommendations going forward in strengthening the systems in place or overhauling such processes completely. Where guilty findings are reported, it is important to identify best practices to emulate in other areas or to adopt into legislative provisions, departmental instructions, and the SANDF orders. Analyze the sentences meted out in guilty findings to determine if they fit the crime or to determine if the legislative frameworks are comparative to the sentences meted out by civilian courts for comparative charges. Determine the average time it takes to finalize matters and determine if there is a need to improve thereon. The Military Discipline Bill of 2019, of course, it is still in Parliament. It has been finalized by Cabinet, must now be analyzed in relation to the management of SIA cases in instances where the SANDF members are deployed externally to determine if there is a need to effect further amendments to address any shortcomings or generally strengthen the framework. The bill is before Parliament, but there's still a window of opportunity to fine-tune the provisions of the bill if based on factual findings and informed recommendations. Determine if there are any factors hindering members to report incidences of sexual harassment or sexual exploitation and abuse cases against their fellow SANDF members in employment areas outside of the Republic of South Africa. Determine similarly, if possible, whether there have been reported cases which have not been investigated, notwithstanding the fact that the matter was reported. The aim of such investigations must be to determine what processes should be put in place to alleviate underreporting or the non-investigation of reported matters, amongst others. Analyze the available pending and finalize cases for the period under consideration with an aim of determining the following. 1. How decisions are taken in relation to the charges of members. That is when their members are charged under the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Act of 2002 versus applicable provisions of the Defence Act of 2002 or the Military Discipline Code attached to the Defence Act of 1957. Determine whether there are any discrepancies in this regard if similar offences were to be prosecuted in the civilian court system. How will this system change for the better or not under the provisions of the Military Discipline Bill of 2019? Is there a need to make additional amendments to the bill in an effort to strengthen the SANDF's response to such cases? 2. analyzing the legal and procedural frameworks in place with the aim of identifying shortcomings in the reporting, investigation, and finalization of these matters. 3, analyze the outcomes of matters reported and investigated in an effort to determine the reasons for guilty or not guilty findings in order to inform recommendations going forward in strengthening our systems. 4, where guilty findings are reported, it is important to identify best practices to emulate in other areas or to adopt into legislative provisions or practice notes. Analyze the sentences meted out in guilty findings to determine if they fit the crime or to determine if the legislative frameworks are comparative to sentences meted out by civilian courts. Determine the average time it takes to finalize these cases. Determine if there are any factors hindering members from reporting incidents of this nature. Establishment of a hotline. We do have a hotline which deals with issues of corruption, which should also deal with issues of this nature as well. But we have now decided that we should have a separate hotline that will deal with issues of sexual exploitation and abuse. So one of the first tasks of the team must be to establish this hotline, to operate initially for the duration of the team's mandate. The team must determine the terms of reference, the management and operation of the hotline together with us. Purpose of the hotline is to, 1, enable the SANDF members to report incidents of sexual harassment or sexual offenses cases. 2, report incidences where such matters were reported but no action was taken. 3, report for members of the SANDF to indicate if they were hesitant to lodge complaints or open cases and the reasons why. We want to know this. If there's a case, if you are a victim and you are reluctant to come forward, we want our victims to talk to us and tell us the reasons why they were reluctant to come forward. For members of the SANDF to report on their own personal experiences in engaging the systems put in place to deal with such matters. For instance, matters of sexual harassment and sexual exploitation and abuse must not simply be lumped with the MDC provisions of conduct unbecoming as an officer. A person who exploits a woman in this way can't be charged for unbecoming conduct, disobeying a lawful instruction, because it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with sexual exploitation and abuse, and that's what we want to deal with. Victim support and protection. Firstly, in executing their mandate, the task team must take steps to determine what measures are in place to protect and support victims from the moment a matter is reported until its finalization. Secondly, victims should be given special attention in the legislative frameworks in place, as well as the military discipline bill being developed. In the processes put in place to manage the systems developed to address the focus areas outlined above, as well as the departmental policies. Thirdly, the task team should make recommendation on a legislative policy and practical level to improve victim support and protection in all matters forming the basis of their mandate outlined above. Furthermore, this task team must also explore administrative discharge and or removal of the alleged perpetrator from the same environment as the victims. This will be to prevent the victim reliving their traumatic experiences. Finally, I therefore urge that as the country's highest military command structures, all members of the Military Command Council, all officers in the South African National Defence Force cooperate with this Ministerial Task Team, who will from time to time need to engage with everybody, with subordinates, with young ones in the bases and units, with trainees in the bases and units of the South African National Defence Force. We also need to examine the appropriateness and relevance of the DOD's sexual harassment policy, as well as how gender perspectives are reflected in our military strategy and doctrine. I trust that all of this, it sounds a little complicated. I don't think it is too complicated. It's a matter of opening up and allow for the victims to step forward without fear of victimization, without fear of not being promoted. And this is one of the messages which we want to send to our troops, which is that you have a right to step forward and report sexual harassment and abuse without fear that the one who is above you, your commander, will victimize you, that people have a right to go for treatment, to go for therapy. We have many psychologists, we have social workers in the environment of defense, we also have chaplains, and therefore people have a right to walk to those people and confide in them, if only to assist them and empower them to gain enough confidence to testify against the perpetrators. I am informed that in some of the cases, the outcome will be insufficient evidence, or that the victim was reluctant to testify. We want to give as much support to the victims to enable them to testify against a perpetrator. And just for information, it's important for you to know this, that our court sittings do happen. They are open, they are at Tabatswane, and you have a right to attend and sit and listen to the proceedings. But right now, as this team, we want this team to do everything to protect the victims of sexual exploitation and abuse amongst men and women in uniform. That for us is the most important thing right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much. Just a quick apology to you, Minister, DM, and the task team. The reason why we have the aircon off is because the sound gets picked up by the cameras, so that's why we switched it off. Apologies. It's a bit hot because of the lights.